Whether it's a hot time in Florida or a rainy night in Georgia,
looking for trouble?
It's the perfect time for the TCBCast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Oh, yes, sir. Good to see you go, folks. This black fix bring you the hottest thing in the country. Real hot and blue. Coming to WHBQ in Memphis, Tennessee.
With your hosts, Justin Gosman and Gurdip Ladar. The TCBcast is on the air.
Welcome to TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis Presley fan podcast. I'm Justin Gosman.
I'm Gurdip Ladar.
Gurdip, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It was great to hear you and Beck last week, although I couldn't help but comment on some of the stuff
yes.
came out of both of your mouths last week, so I don't know.
Yeah. Our Patreon supporters will know that what you're referring to is that we just dropped a review of Terry Stafford's album Suspicion because you couldn't cope with not being able to smack me upside the head talking about Terry Stafford. So
no, it's not just that. I mean, you guys were dissing Sylvia. You guys, Beck, for some odd reason, you gave her a choice to have Elvis perform any song, and then she picked a song that he's performed 1,000 times. I'm like, what? Okay, anyway, let's not get into that.
That's what happens when you're. I mean, that's Gurdip.
You guys are too polite to each other. That's the problem. You guys don't keep it real.
Literally, Beck and I just had this conversation where I was like, "You need to call me on my shit more."
Yeah. If nobody calls out this fool, nothing's gonna happen. Anyway.
Oh, but she's fantastic. We have some exciting news from her that we'll share in a moment. But first off, I want to ask you, how are things going for you? And have you seen everything that's come out in the last week, Elvis-wise?
I've seen most of it, although I think there's another trailer that just came out this morning. I didn't get a chance to look at that.
Yes, there's 2 new television spots that just dropped within the last 24 hours from when we're recording this. We're recording this on Friday.
Mr. President, try not to move around so much during the takes.
I can't move, I can't sing.
But as long as a man has the strength to dream, we can redeem his soul and fly.
I'm gonna show you what the real Elvis is like.
I can think, what I can talk, what I can stand, what I can walk.
But yeah, first off, I want to hear what you think of the If I Can Dream cover that was done on Eurovision Song Contest, and also the subsequent trailer that dropped, the 1-minute TV spot featuring that version of If I Can Dream.
I didn't mind it. I know some people were probably like, well, why didn't they use the Elvis version? But I think they're just trying to, present something a little different. I'm sure they're not going to have that version in the film, and if they do, maybe like a trailer or something in the background. But I didn't mind it. I thought it was fine. I did like looking at the new clips, though. That was nice.
Yes.
Some of the expanded on footage of more of Butler dancing like Elvis. That stuff was great. I thought it really looked good. I can't wait to see this.
And what they showed spanned a pretty huge chunk of what we're going to see from the film. We saw a lot more from the July 4th, 1956 Russwood Park concert. In fact, him speaking in character as Elvis, saying the line that we had gotten reports of from the CinemaCon footage of Elvis saying, "I'm going to show you what the real Elvis is like."
Yes.
Which is an adaptation of what Elvis actually said that night.
Right. The first time I heard that was in that Elvis 56 documentary from the 90s.
Yeah.
They were talking about how Elvis went in New York and, was doing whatever show.
Steve Allen show.
Yeah, the Steve Allen when he was all dressed up in the tuxedo. And then later on when he went to the concert in Memphis, he was like, I'll show you what the real Elvis can do. So that's the first time I actually heard that quote.
Mm-hmm. There's also lots of, because it's a Baz Luhrmann movie, so naturally there's a lot of quick edits. And it being a trailer, of course, they're piecing together even more quick, like just a handful of frames in these montages. But we did see Elvis in what appears to be the Let Yourself Go sequence from the 68 special. We saw just a few shots of him and Priscilla. We saw one very, very quick shot of Alton Mason as Little Richard singing on a stage, a little bit of the gospel number from the 68 special, some 1970 era That's the Way It Is style stuff that we've seen in a limited fashion previously, I think on might have been the initial like TikTok or something where it showed him like throwing his arm up over the top of his head. I'm sure he's doing Suspicious Minds or whatever at that point in the movie. We get some montages of the different jumpsuits and what appears to be real footage from Elvis on tour of like the actual Elvis. There's a split screen shot where on the left hand side Austin as Elvis is putting a bra over his head and he's in the red jumpsuit, and then on the right hand side of the frame it appears to actually be real Elvis footage from 1972.
That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah,
why do you think we're getting all these little clips but not getting a proper second trailer? Is that coming?
Well, now that I'm sitting here talking out loud, we might get another full trailer before the movie comes out, but as we get closer to it. Like, we got to remember, we're still a month out from the theatrical release of the film.
That's right.
So they're just building hype now at this point. And the one thing that I noticed and I posted about on our social media is that in a literal like 5-frame shot before the camera flash goes out, so we're talking fractions of a second, we see a photographer taking a photo of Elvis and B.B. King from the rear of Elvis and B.B. King. And my speculation is that this is the famous photo of B.B. King and Elvis at the WDIA Goodwill Review in 1956, where Elvis was attended and had that picture taken by famed civil rights era photographer and photojournalist Ernest Withers. And that blew my mind because this,
deep. It's going deep.
It's a very deep cut, but also because of the implications that this is not an event that has been talked about or depicted in a major biography of Elvis's life ever. It's not even in that I'm aware of that many documentaries. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Elvis 56. Do you remember those pictures?
Not in there.
Yeah, which is an absolute travesty, considering how many of his peers and influences on the black rhythm and blues and gospel side were present at that event. And we've talked about this before on the show, but the WDIA Goodwill Review was an event put on by Memphis's black-only station, WDIA, for needy black youth in the Memphis area. And Elvis went to the fundraiser to help, contribute, make an appearance. And there's a ton of series of photos taken by Ernest Withers, who was there that night, not only snagging pictures of the many, many other acts that were present, but also there's quite a handful with Elvis, with Rufus Thomas, with Brooke Benton, with...
Didn't he perform there as well?
There are varying reports as to whether he performed. We also know he did also attend in 1957 as well, though there aren't as many photos from the 57 show.
He didn't need to go. Like, he didn't. Like, he could have just sent a check. But
that's the crazy thing, and this is where...
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's like he could have just sent a check, but he actually made an appearance and actually went out when he was at the top of his game.
That's the thing that got me, is that you got to remember in context and chronologically, if he follows the correct chronology of history, this would appear after the Russwood Park concert, because that was in July after the Steve Allen show and after that summer. This is in December. Now, a lot of times people focus on December 56 and they tend to focus on the $1 Million Quartet, because that was the other thing that happened in December 1956 of note. But this also happened at that point, and he was very literally, possibly, arguably, at his popular peak of the 1950s at the end of 1956. Like, he was absolutely on top of the world. He was a superstar in the biggest possible way. He had appeared on all of the major TV shows that he would appear on. You know, he had even appeared by this point on the Ed Sullivan Show, even though he had another appearance coming up in early 57. But, like, he didn't, like you said, he didn't have to go to this, you know, let alone, you know, contribute, let alone, like, the impact of this moment for what it means to be depicted in this film, knowing that it's an historical event that did happen, knowing that Baz is going for a more socially conscious film, you know, a more socially conscious telling of Elvis's life story, and acknowledging that Elvis himself, like, I'm just imagining, we know now this puts in the context the line from that first trailer where B.B. King is having the conversation with him about, like, you know, you're a famous white boy. They're not going to do anything to you, but they would certainly do something to me, you know. And it puts that in the context that this is where I think Elvis is going to be confronted with the realities of, you know, his fame and privilege at the peak of his career.
Right, that's right.
So,
yeah, it'll be great to see. It'll be great to see how this is tackled, because we've never seen it put on film.
Never.
And not even books hardly cover it.
No, yeah, it's pretty egregious. But yeah, there were also, as mentioned, 2 other TV spots that just got dropped literally this morning as we're recording. One has That's All Right Mama playing. Oh, and I did want to say, with the If I Can Dream, in that trailer, at the very end, you can actually hear they layered in Elvis's real vocal on the last couple lines of the song.
Oh, nice.
Ain't no one gonna stop me, man.
Right now. Ready, come to round now. Oh,
Yeah, so if you go rewatch that 1 minute trailer, you can actually hear Elvis. Like my ear caught it right away. It was just like, I know that anywhere.
So what about these new teasers?
Yeah, so new teaser wise, we've got one that has That's All Right Mama and one with Unchained Melody. Most of the Unchained Melody one is not stuff that we haven't seen before. Like it's basically just sort of recutting parts of these other trailers. There's stuff from the Hayride, stuff of him and Gladys. It's pretty much all comprised of shots that we've seen before.
Right.
But the other one that has That's All Right Mama has quite a bit more. There's a new shot with Priscilla. There's some new dialogue from Elvis where he talks about that he knows that he could be great. Or the exact quote is, "I believe I can be great." So that's in there.
Now, do you want them to stop showing new clips?
No, I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, because I think they overshow too much on not just this film, but other films as well. Mm-hmm. I know Sony does a lot of that where they show way too much, but I'd be okay with them not showing any more footage because I actually want to see the film.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to send you this link and so you can look at it, because there is one quote from Colonel Parker that gets included in here that is based in historical fact that they included, and a lot of our listeners this morning when I posted this link had the same sort of reaction, like their ears, perked up upon listening to it.
Are you ready? I believe I can be great.
If you're doing it, you'll do it.
The only thing that matters is that that man gets up on that stage tonight.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that's totally the Colonel. That's all that matters is he gets up there on stage. Who cares how his well-being and his physical health and everything, emotional, it just doesn't matter. He has to get there up on stage. Yes,
and that's rooted in a quote that Colonel Parker apparently actually did say before a May 21st, 1977 concert in Louisville, Kentucky. Does that mean that they'll depict that specific concert? Probably not. It'll probably be condensed to one of the other shows that are, relevant to this.
I think Tom Hanks said way back before this was going to be filmed, he's like, you guys want to see me play a villain? I think you'll see it in this film.
Mm-hmm. We also got an extensive interview with Baz Luhrmann for AARP that Elena Nash conducted, the writer of Elvis and the Colonel, the biography of Colonel Parker, which was kind of interesting to read through. She actually asks him outright, why is Tom Hanks's accent so much stronger than Colonel Parker's was in real life? And Baz lets slip that there are apparently a ton of archival recordings of Colonel Parker at Graceland, and that basically, I'll just read the quote here. He says, "I found it interesting that Parker became obsessed with tape recorders and started taping himself. I spent many hours at Graceland listening to these obscure tapes. His accent changed dramatically depending on whatever situation he was in." So apparently it's rooted in a little bit more of, him slipping into his accent, than we are aware of.
So when he was like in front of the media, he would hide it or try to hide it. But once he was, in private, it probably came out more significantly. I mean, same with Elvis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like his Southern accent came out whenever he was in a relaxed state, like the $1 Million Quartet sessions. I mean, if you listen to him there, I mean, he's as Southern as you can get.
Oh, absolutely.
When you see him in films or other media interviews, he kind of hides it. So, I mean, it's the same thing. Same. It's the same side of the two coins or whatever they say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
interestingly as well, talking about Elvis and Colonel Parker's sort of relationship together, he talks about how he says, "My takeaway is that the Presley-Parker relationship is probably the real love story. Not that there isn't a great and genuine romance between Elvis and Priscilla, but the love story that soars brilliantly but gets a little too close to the sun and tumbles is Elvis and the Colonel. It's almost a codependent marriage that, while toxic and destructive, cannot be unwound." What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think it was a toxic relationship?
I think so. I think there was an element of it where
later on, especially.
Yes, yeah, where Elvis, for whatever various reasons, loyalty, whatever, felt like he owed Parker and couldn't bring himself to really truly ever get rid of him. And then lastly, there was one thing that I kind of wanted to take issue with that Baz talked about in that interview. He's talking about Elena Nash asks him about the 68 special and why that show was so important, and Baz goes on to say Parker had gone out of his way to disconnect Elvis from black music to reinvent him as a wholesome movie star. In 1968, the Colonel had decided to do a giant farewell to Hollywood, and basically the idea was to turn Elvis into a type of Bing Crosby with a Christmas special. Those who loved Elvis quietly expressed their concern, and in his very internal, discreet, Elvis-y way, found himself insisting upon the director Steve Binder and his associates Bones Howe and the conductor William Goldenberg to create the show. They launched under the nose of the Colonel a great subversive move and invented the first unplugged session, which brought Elvis back in front of an audience. More important, Elvis was able to explore his profound and deep love of the music he loved the most. So my issue with it is largely the idea that the 68 special was a singular turning point for Elvis. Ghosty and you and I had an episode that we did, was that last year or 2 years ago now, called The Quiet Comeback, where we pointed out that for anyone who was actually paying attention, and for any historian, the public-facing, sure, we can argue, oh yeah, it was the movies, he wasn't putting out any of that rock and roll or R&B or gospel-influenced music. Whatever, however you want to view that era as the outsider looking in the context of the period, but retrospectively looking back at what was actually going on in his life at that point, he had never lost contact with that music. The fact that he did How Great Thou Art, and it won a freaking Grammy, like nobody can look at How Great Thou Art as an album and say with a serious face that's not Elvis in 1966, 1967, reconnecting with his black gospel roots.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Don't you tell me where could I go but to the Lord? It is so high, you can't get on. So wide, you can't get around. So children. By and by, when the morning comes, all the saints of God gathering home, and we will tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by.
So I do take issue with, and I think my concern with Baz, and I realize that we're on such a granular level here of like, he's talking big picture, people who have no expectations or understanding of Elvis. So my criticism of this is coming not from the point of view of I don't respect or understand what Baz is doing by going for that easy narrative beat of, oh, he was, depressed and, whatever, frustrated with the movies, and the movies are just sort of a tangent to the real story, which is, his career. Mine is more of, okay, Baz, if you're going to have a conversation with Elena Nash, who is just as in the weeds as you are with Elvis's life story, and you're going to be talking about that this was this big disconnect from black music, I take issue on the level of, you got to acknowledge that the 68 special there was more nuance to the lead up to that. That's my point.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he's still in that film mode where you got to, move on and quickly cover stuff.
Yeah, he's looking at, again, I understand big picture. It's an easy narrative beat. It's the the rise before the tragic fall. So right. I totally get it as a storyteller. Absolutely understand, because that's the way that you as a writer would naturally, and as a storyteller would naturally want to go towards. Mm-hmm. But I'll just comfortably say I think that we'll have plenty of stuff to not take issue with, but provide context for when the movie comes out.
Yeah, for sure. That'll give us time to, tell us our thoughts and go and provide more context.
Totally.
I put on your high heel sneakers. I put your wig hat on your head. Hey, you got me working, boss man, working around the clock. I want a little drink of water, but you won't let big girl stop, big boss man. Just rocking and reeling, we'll get that feeling down in the alley. Oh, baby, gee.
We had two other reactions in between to the film. I'm sure that you saw Lisa Marie's reaction on social media. What did you think of what she had to say about the film?
Yeah, it was because I think we both were talking to each other about it. She never really gives her thoughts on portrayals of her dad. I don't think she's ever. Had,
yeah,
has she? But this is pretty interesting. She actually goes out of her way to praise this depiction by Butler, and she says something similar to what I said when this first trailer came out. Oscar buzz, like this is an Oscar-worthy performance. She says he captures the essence of her dad. So I mean, if she went on record here, so this must be something special for her to actually go out and actually publicly say how great this film is, even and more so, like she's still mourning her son. So
yes.
No one would have said anything if she didn't comment, because obviously, you got to give her space, because losing a kid, like only people who have kids can know how that feels, and a year is nothing to, like, for you to still be mourning. Like, I mean, we're talking years, but the fact that she went out to post this, and a lengthy post,
it was
describing
it. That's I love that you pointed out, like, nobody asked her for her opinion on this. No. She felt so moved by the film to go out of her way to post about it at great length.
Yeah, so I mean, that just adds on to my hype, because if someone who's kind of a recluse, let's admit it, she doesn't give too many interviews.
No,
especially now, with the tragedy in her life, for her to praise it and like tell us how great this is, this film must be something special. Like, this is someone who's probably the closest to Elvis, if you think about it, because she's like, that's his daughter. Like, even Priscilla, like, she'll hype up stuff, obviously, but this is someone who never has in the past.
Yeah.
And for her to go out of her way to do that, like, something in this film must be special.
Absolutely. Yeah, and similarly, Riley Keough had an interview with Variety because her film that she's directed called War Pony is also premiering at Cannes. And by coincidence, Elvis also happens to be showing. So Variety interviewed her and her co-director on War Pony, Gina Gamble, and in that lengthy interview asked her about what did you think of Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, and she has a wonderfully thoughtful answer where she talks about how she watched it with she confirmed she was with her sisters, Priscilla, Lisa Marie, and she confirmed that she was also with her dad, Michael Lockwood. And she talks with a lot of diplomacy, I guess, about how anxious she was about the film initially, and that she was considering how interesting it was not to have control over your family's story, right. And that, like, not being in the loop too much on it, other than because she confirmed that, like, the family's involvement was pretty limited, other than, like, our staff at Graceland are going to help you out, like, with all the archival stuff you'll need. We'll, connect you with the people that you need to talk to or whatever. But they weren't, like, consultants on the film. They weren't, and Priscilla has talked about that previously as well, that she was not really aware with what was going on in the production of the film itself. So Riley expressed that she didn't distrust Baz with it, but she felt very protective of what it could be. But then I love what she says. She said in the first 5 minutes she could see just how much work Baz and Austin had put into trying to get it right, and she started crying 5 minutes in and joked that she didn't think she had stopped yet.
He was starting it sort of the right way, and then, but I really had no idea what it was going to be like, of course. So I watched it, and it was really, I think in the first sort of 5 minutes for me, I could just feel how much work Baz and Austin had put into trying to get it right. And that made me emotional immediately. So I started crying 5 minutes in, and I don't think I stopped. So it was so my first watch, I'd like to watch it again because it was just very intense, and there's a lot of family trauma and generational trauma that sort of started around there for our family. So it's it was a very intense experience.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't mention that, but yeah, Lisa also said that this is something her and her kids can be proud of.
Yeah.
So that tells you how great it will be. So, and that Riley quote, it just kind of solidifies that. Absolutely.
So yeah, we've got that the AARP interview, and of course there are tons of stills and things like that going out. So hype is building. We don't have any news on the soundtrack as to when that will actually drop, but I'm hoping sometime within the next few weeks we'll be getting that.
You think it'll be out before the film?
You would think so.
Okay.
At least because Baz in the past has, like, I know for a fact on Moulin Rouge he had two soundtracks, one that came out around the time of the film and then one much, much later that had more interpretations and some of the songs that got left off the first one. So it would almost not even surprise me if they either did like a second soundtrack or a like an expanded soundtrack later on. One of the two, either have a separate album or just an expanded version of the main album. Because I imagine the first soundtrack will be all of the covers and the interpretations and that promotional album. Whereas I'm sure that they want to have an album come out that's Elvis, the original recordings with whatever extra instrumentation they've added, and then Austin himself.
Right. Well, as soon as it comes out, we shall review it probably.
Yeah. We got one more thing news-wise that we can reveal now. I made sure to check with Beck on this. Word's gotten out there. Obviously, there's a Sydney premiere in Australia. Baz Luhrmann's going to be there. Austin Butler's going to be there. Olivia de Jong's going to be there. Tom Hanks is going to be there. It's going to be a whole kit and caboodle. They did, for a limited number of people, open up tickets for sale. But Beck did not actually have to buy a ticket to get to the premiere. She was actually invited to the Sydney premiere.
Wow.
She has an inside connection and is able to go basically using TCBcast as her media credentials. She'll be attending as a member of the media. So Beck, we'll be talking more and more with her as per usual in the coming weeks as well. But Beck and I have already sort of agreed that once she gets out of the premiere and when she's trying to process it in the immediate aftermath, she's going to give me a call. We might have a recording of that for like patrons only or something, like a spoiler immediate reactions.
Oh, spoiler filled. Wow.
Yeah. Because
Nice.
apparently they don't have any requirements for her to sign an NDA or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
So as far as I know, we should be able to have some spoilers from Beck early in and that's the thing, date June 5th, so like
June 5th
coming right up, so she's gonna get to see the movie way before a lot of other people.
But we will have an early exclusive TCB cast reaction to the film and maybe spoilers. So if you want, like patrons, if you want to listen, like if you don't want to listen, don't listen to that one. But if you don't care about spoilers, because I know Mr. Gosman here cares very little about spoilers.
I don't.
He'll read stuff way beforehand. He won't care. Because you were telling me like Endgame spoil. You were telling me you read about Endgame spoilers way before the film actually came out, and I was like, "Don't tell me! Stop it!"
Yeah.
So he doesn't care. So if you're like him, you should go ahead and listen to that episode. I'm trying to look at if there's any preview shows here, but there's nothing yet. So I know when we get closer, like maybe a week before its actual release or 2 weeks, they sometimes have select screenings at various parts of the city. So usually I don't care. Like these Marvel movies come out, I'm like, whatever, I can wait. But this, I might make the exception because I don't know if I brought this up, but there's a wedding happening on the day that this film is released. And I'm not going to be able to go on that Friday. So my hope is, one, either I get some kind of preview that I can watch beforehand, like a week before, or because this is a bigger city and because films usually, like big films, come out the Thursday, I'm hoping there's an early showing of Elvis on that. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wait till the weekend. So we'll see.
It'll be a whole thing. Before we dig into our main topic, we have one short email from one of our patrons, Leah, who writes in to say, "Hi, guys. I just realized that we're getting closer to the 20th anniversary of the JXL remix of A Little Less Conversation becoming a hit. Does that make you feel old? It makes me feel old."
Everything makes me feel old.
Back in the 90s when I was a teenager, I used to think about writing a letter to whomever it was that controlled Elvis's recordings and telling them how they should remix his music. I never bothered because I didn't think they would care. At that time, I never dreamed an Elvis remix could actually become a hit. I just wanted Elvis remixes for myself. Fast forward to 2002, I was 20 and had actually lost interest in Elvis's music a year earlier. I was wasting time on the internet when I stumbled upon news that a remix of an Elvis song had hit #1 in the UK. My response was, I stopped being an Elvis fan for 1 year, and this happens? The remix rekindled my interest in his music, and it was great to hear Elvis played on radio stations he normally would have never been played on. I never thought something like this would ever happen. Now that the new movie's coming up, I'm kind of feeling a lot of the excitement I felt back then. So what about you guys? What are your memories of the remix of A Little Less Conversation? I think you've talked about this before, but it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on how it feels to realize that it's been 20 years since it became a hit. Keep up the good work, Leah.
A little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfaction in me. A little more fight, a little less fun. A little less fight, a little more spark. Close your mouth and open up your heart and maybe satisfy me. Satisfy me, baby.
Yeah, I think when it came out, I was listening to Elvis, but I wasn't like as big as I was in the mid 80s, mid 90s. So it would have been even like bigger for me if it came out then. I still was listening, and I was like, wow, this remix is pretty good, and I like the fact that a lot of people seem to be enjoying it, and it was in commercials and what have you. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then when the other remixes came out from our boy, what's his face?
Spancox.
I was like, wow, this is great. More mixes, because I love remixes. That Elvis medley, I played the hell out of that. So give me more remixes. I'm all for it. But I think it was bigger for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was very impressionable. I was young. I was 13 years old when the remix dropped. And I absolutely adored it. And I had already had an interest in Elvis, and it was already being fostered by this point. But I was still a relatively early fan. Yeah. And I fell head over heels for it. You know, it wasn't even so much that I really liked techno music to the point where I was like gung-ho about it to begin with. Yeah. But it was the excitement that I saw when it started appearing in other pop culture media. You know, it pretty quickly appeared in a couple movies. Bruce Almighty was an early one, I think, from 2003 or 4 or something like that. It appeared in. And just seeing it all over like television and the hype. There were some Elvis websites that I was visiting around the time that were talking about the excitement of it going #1 in the UK. It was a big deal, and it helped that it had a big marketing push by a multinational sports equipment company, you know, Nike, you know, doing shoes. And they really pushed that that campaign to the point where it was almost ubiquitous.
Yeah, for sure. It was huge. So
yeah,
Leah, I can understand how you were out of it and then you got pulled back in, like they say in Godfather 3. But yeah, it's great. It's awesome.
And we've gotten,
and thank you for your support as well.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, and I just want to throw up. I've got on tentatively our schedule for later this year. I do want to do an episode on the 20th anniversary of Elvis 30 #1 hits and sit back down with that album. Maybe sometime this September.
How many times have we talked about those songs?
The songs, yeah. But as a package,
Let's
like
do it. Let's do it.
I'll pull out my original CD and we'll go through the liner notes and everything. So.
I don't think I bought that.
Oh, it's good.
I had all the songs. So
it's so cheap now. Just go buy a copy.
No, but why? I had all those songs anyway in other forms. So no, I'm talking about like now.
Yeah.
I can just stream it. But I'm saying back in the day when that came out, there was nothing on it that I didn't have.
But right? it was the fact that they were remixing the songs, like not remix from the sense of a little less conversation, but literally, remaster and remix are two different things. But they were changing the mix on the songs that were in stereo,
right? And
were multi-track. So
yeah.
It was,
I might have. I can't even remember now.
There was a huge improvement in the audio fidelity. I remember that I've got, in fact, the DVD audio version of that album that has some bonus tracks that do like an A-B comparison of like, here's what the master used to sound like. Right. Now here's what the 30 #1 hits version sounds like. And it just popped so much more. They were approaching it.
A lot too.
Yeah, they approached it with a 2002 era idea of mastering.
Right.
Return the sender. Return the sender. I gave a letter to the postman. He put it in his sack. Bright and early next morning, he brought my letter back. She wrote upon it, return the sender, address unknown.
So there were criticisms of it at the time too, but that's a whole episode unto itself. Like I said, probably September we'll get around to doing that on its anniversary.
Was the criticism from people who were like, you've changed the music?
Pretty much, yeah. And there was also the fact that, if you remember, there were a few songs where they used the incorrect take or incorrect performance.
Yeah, that's right.
The Wonder of You was
right?
was a completely different performance. So
I'd like to ask people, like, I'm not criticizing, but people who are traditionalists and they don't like Elvis's music changed at all, why? No one's going to go and break your original CDs or anything, like, or your albums. So why are you against something new? I'm just curious. That doesn't make sense to me. Does it to you?
Hey, don't touch my Elvis.
Yeah, don't touch my Elvis, but still, I'm saying...
No, I know. It's like, well, for instance, one of the criticisms I heard, even when Doja Cat's Vegas dropped, was, this is like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. Here's the problem. With music, making recordings and copies, it's not really the same as, like, yeah, I guess if you literally went and, like, recorded over the original master tape and, like, destroyed it by adding something new on that, where, like, it literally deformed the tape, sure, yeah, then you can say it's, you know, but, like, it's a copy, so it's like making a clone of the Mona Lisa and then altering that clone.
Yeah.
It's not even remotely close to the same thing.
Doesn't make sense. That's like saying, oh, we're going to destroy the masters. And this will be the only version that you can get.
That's literally, that's the, like, even in the 2000s when A Little Less Conversation came out, there was that criticism, and I remember seeing people like, oh, they're going to, you know, start doing remixes and they're just going to replace all the originals. And, you know, it was this big threat, I think, for a while where people were with Rubberneckin and then Viva Elvis and some of those projects in the 2000s, the aughts and the very early teens, where people were like, oh, this is what they're going to do. They're going to replace the originals. Well, it's like, okay, now we're 20 years out and they still haven't replaced the originals.
It's just presented differently. I mean, people, like younger people, they don't want to hear older songs like that mono sound. They want something upbeat and with new instrumentation. What are you going to do? You can't stop technology and, you know, people having new beats. Like, it's going to keep going on after me and Justin Gosman are gone. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some kind of new form of music. Who knows what? Maybe like banging on, like, I don't know, frogs, like getting frogs and making them speak and getting that beat and putting that in anything. I don't know, whatever the new music will be. It's going to be mixed in with Elvis. It's just going to happen. It's going to progress. Music keeps changing. What did Vince Everett say?
Music changes every 6 months. You got to change with it.
Exactly. It's never going to go away, but it's not going to be as popular as you want it to be. I've already come to that conclusion. So, I mean, people really got to accept it. Keep your old vinyls. Listen to them. Don't worry. Everything will be okay.
So, speaking of old vinyls and old recordings, we got to sit down this week with a fantastic, classic old album from 1967. Look at this segue. Main topic. What are we doing?
Very good. Well, you came out and said that the Sweet Inspirations, they had a bunch of albums, and you thought, you know, it'd be fun to look at their very first one, which is called The Sweet Inspirations.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, you said fantastic. I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but it's pretty good. It's not too bad.
Yeah. And
now, did you know about this before?
I knew that they had put out albums. I hadn't listened to too many of them, which is a shame because now I'm definitely going to go check out more of some of the other albums that they put out. I know that they had a run of several in the late 60s, early 70s. Right. But yeah, the past...
This is before their association with Elvis.
That's correct, yeah. And in a second, we'll talk about how the Sweet Inspirations got started. But one of our patrons, I think it was Olivia, who has also come on the show a couple times, had actually requested this at one point in the Patreon poll suggestions, and then at another point replaced it with something else that she really wanted to hear us talk about. But I just wanted to acknowledge that it had shown up there on the polls previously. It wasn't on the poll this month. In fact, we do know there's another anniversary that we're going to be talking about next week. The King of Rock and Roll 50s Master Set is going to be the topic from the Patreon poll this month. But just wanted to acknowledge that Olivia gave us this initial suggestion, so we're going to dive into the Sweet Inspirations.
That darn Olivia, always telling us what to do.
I know. So what did you know of the Sweet Inspirations? You know, from obviously you probably were introduced to them through Elvis.
I I didn't
certainly
know
was.
too much. I mean, I knew that they backed up Elvis during the 70s, but the thing is, I was interested in the 50s and early 60s Elvis,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't really care too much about the 70s Elvis because, as I've said in the past, I didn't like the slow-ass songs. But, I've grown to appreciate that stuff and grown to appreciate their backup vocals. And I knew that Cissy Houston was one of the members, obviously Whitney Houston's mother. So I was like, yeah, they sound great together. But besides that, I didn't really dig too much into them. I didn't dig too much into all like the Imperials or anything. And J.D. Sumner, I'm not a big fan of. So I'm not a huge like Elvis backup group fan, except obviously the Jordanaires because they're in that wheelhouse of mine. But yeah, from what I've heard from the Sweets, I was like, these guys are great. And if they had backed up Elvis exclusively, more so than other groups, I would be fine with that. Anything to get JD out of there. People who like JD do not take offense to that. This is just my opinion. Sorry.
Yeah. So as mentioned, Cissy Houston was at the time that they even joined up with Elvis, sort of the de facto leader of the group, but it actually had its roots in an act from very early in, late 50s even, called the Drinkard Singers. Now, Drinkard was the family's original name. That was her maiden last name before she was married to John Houston. But Cissy, her siblings, brothers and sisters alike, got together, encouraged by their father, Nicholas, who got them together to basically turn into a gospel group, singing together. And that group ended up getting a record deal with RCA in 1957 after appearing at the Newport Jazz Festival.
Everybody's talking about heaven ain't going there. Yes, Lord, heaven, yes, Lord. I'm gonna walk all over God's heaven. Everybody's talking about heaven ain't going there. Heaven, yes, Lord, heaven, yes, Lord. I'm gonna walk all over God's heaven. You got shoes.
And subsequently recorded a handful of gospel albums starting in 1959. And then right around the turn of the decade, that's when things started to change. Lineups were constantly changing with the Drinkard Singers. There were some additional family members and family friends that got brought in. Their cousins, Dee Dee and Dionne Warwick, ended up at one point members of iterations of the Drinkard Singers and the early sort of pre-inspirations, because they started doing backup singing for other acts in the early 60s and became in quite high demand. And as the lineup evolved, Dee Dee and Dionne left to pursue their own careers. Doris Troy ended up kind of spinning off and doing her own career. She was sort of a family friend. Judy Clay, who was sort of adopted into the Drinkard family, ended up being replaced by Sylvia Shemwell. Myrna Smith, who was a cousin as well, sort of ended up joining in, and Estelle Brown got brought in. So
Evolving.
It was constantly evolving, but by the time that they were actually given the name These Sweet Inspirations, the lineup was Cissy, Myrna, Sylvia, and Estelle.
And they're the ones who are pretty much on this album we're reviewing, right?
Yes. Yep, that's the one. And they're the ones who were with Elvis starting in 1969. And they basically were brought on to Atlantic Records by Jerry Wexler. As he tells the story, he's the one who gave them the name The Sweet Inspirations. There's some various quibbles over what was the actual name of the group, like how did it come about. He's got a really lame story of how it was like, oh, I've got an inspiration or something like that. And it's very sweet. According to Cissy Houston's autobiography, How Sweet the Sound, originally they were just called The Group when they were actually signed to Atlantic Records, and then between Wexler and the marketing teams and stuff, they decided to call them The Inspirations for their gospel background. And then when they realized there was already another group out there just called The Inspirations, they added The Sweet Inspirations. So that's how they got the name. And
Sissy was the leader, you said?
yes, she was. And,
I'm surprised she didn't push for Sissy Houston and the Sweet Inspirations.
right?
Doesn't that always happen?
That tends to happen, yeah. Or even like as the marketing team could have potentially gone that route. But they did a number of recordings backing other artists up, including Jimi Hendrix on The Burning of the Midnight Lamp. They backed up Aretha Franklin on a number of hit recordings. Think
about what you're trying to do to me, yeah. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free. Oh, freedom, 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 yeah, freedom.
Chain of Fools.
Change, 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 change.
A Natural Woman.
You make me feel. You make me feel. You make me feel like a natural woman.
They also backed up Van Morrison on his hit song Brown Eyed Girl.
You, my brown-eyed girl. Do you remember when we used to sing?
Brown-Eyed Girl. Excellent song. Love it. Even my wife likes that song.
Yeah, no, it's
Huge
fantastic. Fan. Yes, yes. And then they would go on to also back Dusty Springfield on the whole Dusty in Memphis album.
The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Lord, he was. Yes, he was.
Just all over the place in 60s soul music and 60s R&B music. But where we find them here is that Jerry Wexler decided, yeah, we're going to give you your own album. And so they sent them down in April 1967 to American Sound in Memphis, and produced by Tom Dowd and Tommy Cogbill, with Chips Moman serving as engineer. They recorded The Sweet Inspirations.
Nice, nice. Now, you've never heard this before, right? You said?
I had dug this up a few years ago and listened to this, but had not really dug into it for learning. So it was definitely a deep dive for me.
Before we start, as usual, I'd like to talk about the cover.
Yes.
What do you think about this album cover?
It's very 60s.
Very 60s with the font and the colors. Now, why are they blending into the background? Did you notice that?
Yeah,
like
they've got them in these costumes that are, I guess it's a black and white pattern with like these black.
It's like rock bricks type of thing.
Yeah.
And then they're leaning on rocks.
And they're leaning on rocks outside.
I'm like, I don't know what this is going on. I think they could have come out with something better.
It's okay. It's not one of the greats, but I think it's all right.
It does
I'm sitting here looking at it, and I'm like, I can only imagine how awkward and painful that must have been for a second to like try to find a comfortable position on that rock.
On a rock?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't lived until you sat on a good rock. I do it all the time.
Like the little old wise man sitting out there on the rock.
Around looking at the perfect rock, and then I just get out and just sit on it, hoping someone will walk by and take a picture of me. Anyway, let's.
And you know what they'd say? They'd say, well, what a fool he is.
Exactly.
Look at this
Bravo.
fool. Because the first song on the album, "Oh What a Fool I've Been."
You used to be
so good to me. I let you get your hooks in me. Oh, what a fool I've been. You done hurt me again.
Yes. Never heard this before. But when I first heard that organ, I was like, uh-oh, Justin Gosman might not dig this. Well, what do you think?
So I actually quite like this. I think it helps that with their gospel background, you can almost put this in that frame of mind to where it's like they're carrying through that influence into their pop stuff.
Right.
You know.
But is this a best way to open an album, though?
I think it's all right. It's sort of a slow burn. Like, it's not like a grab you by the collar, and just grab your attention. But
Right.
I think it is very much a slow burn. Let's build up into it. Yeah. And I like how when they get to the chorus, like, the harmonies just come together so nicely.
Harmonies are
like
really good.
across the board. Like, we'll just say, like, because otherwise we'll get repetitive. But like the harmonies are just fantastic amongst these four women.
I like a good harmony.
Yes.
This is not bad. Probably needs a few more listens from me before I start grooving with it. But you know what? I can totally picture something like this in like a Tarantino film, because he usually likes to throw in like obscure tracks like this from the 60s.
Oh, totally.
I can hear him put this in one of his newer films.
Yeah,
so.
and this was a new composition specifically for the Sweets. This was written by Daryl Carter, Dan Penn, and Spooner Oldham.
Nice.
Or Oldham. So
Nice. Blues, Stay Away From Me, which is what I say all the time.
Love was never meant for me. True love was never meant for me. I'm seen somehow. We never can agree. Now blues, stay away. Just stay away from me. Oh, blues. Oh, blues. Why don't you stay away from me?
Another track I've never heard of, but like when it starts, I'm like, uh-oh, because it seemed kind of downtrodden. But then when the groovy music kicks in, I was like, yeah, that's more like it. Good stuff here. You could really hear the Aretha Franklin inspiration, though, can't you?
very much so. And what's interesting about this one is that this was originally a country song
Really?
for the Delmore Brothers.
Stay away from me. Blues, why don't you let me be? Don't know why you keep on haunting me.
It just goes to show that like the Sweets they had that diversity of musical interest and influence, as well. That they liked country music just as much as they loved, blues and rhythm and blues and gospel.
Now, is that
much
a fact
like Elvis.
that you know of for sure? Or is this something you're just making up in your country-addled mind?
I mean, they backed Elvis up on country music.
Yeah, but that's because it was a paid gig. But that still doesn't mean that they liked country. Yeah, this is just you just putting on your own 2 bits to their brain. It's like, oh, they sang country, so they must have liked country. No, they did not like
Well, that's
country.
why they changed it up.
I'm going to contact these people, and I'm going to ask them if they like country music. And if they say no, I'm going to say, in your face, Gosman. They hated country, in fact.
What I love...
They cringed every time they were backing Elvis up on a country song.
Nah. What I love about this, too, is, of course, because the Memphis Boys are backing them up, this has very much a feel of what Elvis would go on to have and what, obviously, Dusty Springfield, B.J. Thomas, a lot of the other artists who recorded at American Sound would have on the material from 1969 for Elvis. It's very funky, and the Sweets are really making the Memphis Boys bring it.
Next, Don't Let Me Lose This Dream.
If it goes away, I might as well hang it up, 'cause I don't know if I have the heart of mine to make it true or help it grow. And I only know if I lose this dream, it's goodbye love and happiness. You're the one I need.
Let's make it the trifecta. I've never heard this one either. It's okay, but I don't groove with this like I did Blues Stay Away From Me. It's all right, but it doesn't really stand out. I guess how they say great album cut. I think this is a good album cut. But do you like it?
So this is one that Aretha Franklin had previously done. She had cut it, I think, in '66, but it had come out on her 1967 album, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. And Aretha's, when you compare back-to-back with this, Aretha has a bit more of an edge to it than the Sweets do, despite theirs having more of a gospel funk arrangement. And Aretha's is more of, it's more easy listening.
Right.
I like this. I think I prefer Aretha's, but I do like the way that they've mixed up the arrangement. It reminds me a lot of the song I'm Coming Home, Baby, that was often used in Elvis's introductions and things, and it had been a hit. Like they gave it a little bit of a musical twist. It's not bad. I like it. And they get to trade off lines.
Yeah. Next, Knock on Wood.
Yes.
Now this I've heard before. Eddie Floyd? Yes, totally. Excellent version. His vocals are great. And also there's like an Otis Redding one with Carla Thomas. Mm-hmm. Great stuff. So right away, when you cover a song like this, you're going against like vocal giants. They're like, you got to bring it. And I think their version is okay. Swinging towards meh. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the thing about this is the expectation of going in knowing the Eddie Floyd version, being so familiar with it.
Right.
This maybe comes off as one of the weaker cuts just because, like, arrangement-wise, it's so faithful and imitative of the original Eddie Floyd version.
Right.
To the point of where you could almost criticize it as derivative, which I think harms it. Because I think in its own rights, like imagine a world where, because like obviously they wouldn't record it if it hadn't already been a hit for him, but imagine a world where his didn't exist. Like this is a perfectly serviceable version of the song.
'Cause your love is better than any love I know. It's like thunder, lightning. The way you love me is frightening. I better knock on wood, baby. Knock, baby.
It's like thunder, lightning. The way you love me is frightening. I better knock on wood, baby.
They don't do anything spectacular with it.
True.
And like they don't even come close to the other ones. So what was the point of including it here?
Yeah. No, I think they were, and reading some of the reports about the making of this album and the recording session, from what I understand, because they were covering a lot of material that had already been out there rather than a lot of original material, they were a little unchallenged by some of the material on here. And I think that's very much the case.
Dare I say there's a reason that why they're backup singers? Or am I going to get the wrath of Sweets fans out there?
Maybe.
Because when they say once you're used to being a backup singer, you don't really want the spotlight on you, and you don't bring it. And they really didn't bring it on this, did they?
So, what do you think of "Do Right Woman, Do Right Man," which co-written by Chips Moman and Dan
by
Penn?
Your boy, Chips Moman, originally by Aretha, right?
Yes, indeed, from that same album.
Yeah,
I Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You.
Oh, a woman's only human. She's only human. You should understand.
Their version is surprisingly solid as well. I think they almost matched the Franklin version, which is incredible.
Yeah. What I love about Aretha's is that, because I on all of these where there was another version, I kind of played them back to back during one listen to just be like, okay, what did they do differently that wasn't done or had already been done on the original. Right. But on this one, there's an aching in the delivery that Aretha has that I think Sissy very much carries forward.
She does. She does. I was impressed.
Yeah. No, this is. Like, wow, I think they really did pull it out on this one, but it helps that it's strong material.
Yeah, of course. Last song from the first side, "Don't Fight It." This reminded me of like those early '60s girl group songs that produced by Phil Spector. It's pretty good. I was bobbing my head to it, and it's just a nice feel good song.
There you sit, hey, all by yourself, and everybody's dancing. They can't help themselves. The groove is much too strong. They can't hold out long. So get up, hey, and don't fight it, 'cause you got to feel it. You better get on up.
Yeah, this had been previously a top 5 R&B hit for Wilson Pickett, who co-wrote it, and it's got this very like Wilson Pickett-esque sort of shuffly R&B feel. And like if you go back and listen, they actually flipped the lyrics to make it from a woman's perspective. But I like it, and it's really funky. But the one thing that stuck out to me, especially compared with the Wilson Pickett version, is that it almost sounds to me like the instrumentation is way buried in the mix, even compared to some of the other songs on this album. Not that like I have a problem with the suites being clearly able to be heard and distinctly being able to be heard, but I was kind of straining, like the band's really turning in something back there, but it's a little hard to hear it.
They did the 60s Elvis RCA method where he's way up front.
Yeah, exactly.
You sure it wasn't RCA there doing what they're they snuck in there?
This was Atlantic. Yeah, was Atlantic taking tips from RCA?
Yeah. All right, so side B, the first song, Sweet Inspiration.
So this, I just want to throw out there, this is the song where, in the tellings of the stories of how this session came about and how it was going, this was the moment where like they weren't being challenged by a lot of the other material, and so in the middle of the session, Spooner Oldham and Dan Penn walk out on lunch break. In 40 minutes, they write Sweet Inspiration based off the name of the group and bring it in. And holy fuck, what a statement this song is. Like, honestly, this should have been the first song on the album.
I need your sweet inspiration. I need you here on my mind every hour of the day. Without your sweet inspiration.
But I told you you should open it strong, and you're like, oh, it's a slow burn, blah blah blah. Open it big. Why not? You want to grab the audience. And is it just me, or does this opening sound like Suspicious Minds a little bit? It sounds totally like Suspicious Minds to me. I was like, wait a second. I was waiting for them to say Caught in a Trap, but that didn't happen. It's pretty catchy though.
It is.
And I threw this on my playlist. I was like, this is good. Like, something about it just hooks me, even though I never heard it before. And then I heard the Wilson Pickett version also, which is another great one.
I need your sweet inspiration. Now, baby, that's all I ask. That's all I ask from you, yeah. Got to have the sweet inspiration, baby. It ain't no telling what a satisfied man can do.
Nice. Next is a song that we both know, Let It Be Me. This was the song of the week for me, I think, way back in the day. I love the Everly Brothers version, but Elvis is, to me, that's like the version. And theirs is okay, but it's a little too pedestrian, a little too plain Jane for me.
Theirs is pulling more from the Jerry Butler and Betty Everett version, I think.
Right. It didn't make me sit up and take notice. Just kind of meh. Maybe because I've heard like two other versions that are like out of the like knock it out of the park, but it's okay.
Each time we meet, I find complete love. With all your sweet love, what would I feel?
So never leave me lonely. Just tell me you love me only, and that you'll always let it be me.
Did you like it?
See, I really like this version.
Really?
Of it. Yeah. This is honestly, and we get through the rest of this half of the album. I think the second half of this album is stronger than the first half. There's a lot of great material on the back half.
You can't
of
say
album.
this equals like Everly or Elvis's.
I think that on its own terms, it's just as enjoyable as Elvis's version.
You're out of your mind.
Not comparing the two as
you're crazy.
Especially towards the end where they pick it up, it gets a little funkier. Yeah, I dig it.
They don't groove with it like Elvis.
No,
Elvis
I
is fun with it, and he's like adding ad-libbing stuff to it. It's just so much like So
and this
great.
was issued as a single from the album. It charted in the top 20 R&B and just cracked the Hot 100. And I just wanted to throw out there as well that Sweet Inspiration was a crossover hit for him. Peaked at number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100. So that was their biggest hit by far.
Right. Now, next song, I'm Blue, written by Ike Turner. Now, right away, I was like, wait a minute.
Here I go again, girls. What's my weakness? Okay, then chillin', minding my business. You saw I looked around and I couldn't believe this. I swear, I stared, my niece, my witness. The brother had it going on with something kinda wicked. Had to kick it. I'm not shy, so I asked for the digits. I hope no, that don't make me see what I want. Slip, slide to it swiftly. Felt it in my hips, so I dip back to my bag of tricks. Then I flip forward, tip, made me wanna do tricks on them, lick them.
Salt and Pepper sampled this for their 1992 hit, Shoop, which, if people aren't familiar with that song already, you would have heard it in the film Deadpool. And I don't think I've heard this before, but man, this is another standout. Like, I can really groove with this. Like, that whole Shoop thing is catchy. Let me just quickly throw this on my playlist. This was good, and maybe I'm with you. And the second side is like much stronger.
Yeah, and of course, having been written by Ike Turner, he had originally given it to the Ikeettes in the early '60s, but the Sweets really crank it up. It being the late 60s, they add a lot more of the funk elements to it, sort of that late 60s Memphis soul type feel, and I love it. And it's same reaction. Like when I heard it, I was like, wait a minute, I've heard this before. This is good stuff.
Let me get out my Salt and Pepper album. Confirm.
No, cassette tape. It's got to be the cassette tape.
Yes, cassette tapes. Actually, yeah, I did have the cassette tape. Reach Out. I should play that for my wife. And I'm like, wait a second. Have you heard this before?
Yeah.
I make a bet she'll be like, yes.
Turn her head. Yeah.
Reach Out For Me. When I put this on, I was like, wait a sec, this sounds very similar to Piece of My Heart, which was originally done by Irma Franklin, Aretha's older sister, and then later, much popular by Janis Joplin. It had that same kind of vibe, at least the beginning part of it.
Reach out, baby. All you gotta do is reach out, reach out, reach out. Why don't you try? All you gotta do is reach out. I'll get there somehow, baby. Oh, when you go through a day and the things that people say, they make you feel so small.
And I checked if there was any connections, but there's not. It's probably just me. I don't know. But still, pretty good song. Great vocals. Standout track.
No, this is, it's a good song. Co-written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Original by Lou Jordan back in 63. And they do justice to the song, I think. I think it's a pretty good cover.
Right. Really good. Here I Am. Check out the power vocals. Again, I'm guessing it's Cissy Houston. Great stuff. This one's also begging me to add to my playlist. I really love this. Very strong. What do you think?
Yeah, Here I Am was co-written by David Porter and Isaac Hayes, famously of Stax Records. But This was, from what I understand, and I tried digging to see if there were any other versions of this, this is apparently an original song for the Sweets by David Porter and Isaac Hayes.
Nice.
So giving them a chance to really shine vocally.
I'm telling you, here I am. Just take me, take me, oh yeah. I've never wanted anything, not the way that I want you. So now if I'm being
I'm finding, again, I think the second half of this album is much, much stronger than the first half.
Yeah. And then lastly...
There's a lot of attitude in this one. I like it.
Lastly, Why Am I Treated So Bad? I know we pointed out earlier, but yeah, lots of harmonies in here. It's not a standout for me, but it's a pretty cool way to end the album. Like, go back on this like laid back, groovy song. I think it's, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this had originally been done by the Staple Singers and written by Roebuck Staple. And I guess I'm not as familiar with this, but apparently it was a big hit for a number of other artists. And it was covered by just about every soul act in the 60s. So it's not a big surprise that the Sweets would be so familiar with it and want to do a cover of it. But
nice.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not a bad way to close an album. It's similar to the beginning of the album. A little bit more of a slow burn at the end, too.
Yeah.
It does sort of come full circle in that way. But some fantastic soul vocals, and the Memphis Boys are just as good as they always are, as we've heard on so much of the material that they were on in this era.
Yeah.
I'm all alone while I sing this song. Hear my call. I done nobody wrong, but I'm treated so bad. Oh, so
bad. And that's across the board, like across this whole album. If you love what Elvis's music sounded like in 1969, like I do, you will love at least experiencing this album at least once.
I think it's pretty good. I think it's a really good album, although strangely, like the opening and last track, they don't give you what, the majority of the album is made of. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, have you ever seen those burgers that people wrap in lettuce? It's like that. It's like a lettuce burger. It's like the outside is but that's the inside is where you get the good stuff. I bet nobody's made that analogy.
I understand the analogy. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. But yeah, so after the album and the single came out, the first single, The Sweet Inspiration, had become a big hit. That was basically what put them on the radar of Elvis Presley, that one song. And from what I understand, he didn't even bother like auditioning them. Like, it was just that, like, he had the Blossoms with him on the 68 special and very briefly in Change of Habit, but they were not available for any sort of, engagement like that. And when he had heard the Sweet Inspirations, he had heard their big hit, and he apparently just really felt strongly that he wanted that soul sound in his stage show, and committed to bringing the Sweets on.
Before I go any further, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the members of my crew to you that are doing such a fantastic job. First of all, the young ladies that open our show tonight, and they really live up their name, ladies and gentlemen, the Sweet Inspirations. Yeah.
From reading Sissy's autobiography and some of the sections about her time with Elvis, which was much more limited because obviously she ended up leaving, which basically just left the other three, Myrna, Sylvia, and Estelle, to basically stay with Elvis throughout the time that they were with him. But she actually talks about that 69 engagement and how she would actually get quite a bit bored doing the same show night after night after night, and so she would try to mix things up, and that's where you get the "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" Elvis is just going off to her, sticking straight with the vocal. Like, she is that recording is Sissy trolling Elvis. We're just gonna go all out on this.
Someone said the world's a stage and each must play a part. Oh, God. Oh, man, I
So, but what do you think of the album? Do you think that it was a good choice for Elvis to bring them into the fold?
Oh, for sure. They were great backing him up. So I wonder if he listened to this album.
Oh, I would be very surprised if Elvis Presley did not have a copy of this in his collection. And nice. I will say there is at least one recording. We've not done it as Song of the Week, but there is a recording of Elvis doing Sweet Inspiration on stage, making a point to introduce the Sweets and sing their hit song. He actually sings it.
Nice.
Excellent. Inspiration. I need you here on my girl like every hour of the day. Without your sweet inspiration, the lonely hours of the night just don't go my way.
And just real quick, just a couple of the songs that they did afterwards that would be of note after being with Elvis. They were also on Three Corn Patches for T-Bone Walker, which is weird because Elvis would also do that song.
I said three corn patches, about four cotton fields away. Three corn patches, about four cotton fields away. Lives the prettiest girl in the whole darn U.S. I said
In 1978, after Elvis passed away, they were on Frankie Valli's recording of the song Grease from that movie. And much later, the rock band The Killers brought them in for a couple cuts on their first album, Hot Fuss, including one called All These Things That I've Done, which has a gospel choir feel to it in the second half of the song. And I remember hearing that, and I remember looking through the booklet with my ex at the time, and I was like, wait a minute, the Sweet Inspirations? I know these ladies. So
me and them go way back.
They were steady workers throughout the rest of their careers, and of course, in the late '90s and throughout the 2000s, they were part of the Elvis in concert stage show as well. So they always maintained their love of the music and work that they did with Elvis, and they always continued to perform. Even in Elvis's tour, like they were one of his opening acts for many years. So
nice.
It's good stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, should we head down to Song of the Week?
Let's do it.
Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elvis Presley. Well, get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans.
What a night. Ooh, what a night it was. It really was such a night. Well, when Monday comes, she's Tuesday. When Tuesday comes, she's Wednesday. Somewhere in the heart of Rome. He talked and talked, and I heard him say, I know that you've been told it's not fair to tease. It's the edge of reality.
All right, I think I'm up first. So, yeah, I was looking at our list of, we are still getting closer and closer to wrapping all of the 50s recordings for Song of the Week. So I decided to knock one more off the list, and I decided to go for How Do You Think I Feel?
How do you think I feel? Well, I know your love's not real. The girl I'm mad about is just to get about. How do you think I feel? How do you think we stand? Well, I know you've made your plans, but you've included 3, and that's too much for me. How do you think I feel?
Nice.
Yeah, recorded September 1st, 1956, Radio Recorder Studio 1 in Hollywood. But of course, it was released originally by Red Sovine from 1954. It was co-written by Webb Pierce and Wayne Walker. Webb Pierce, the famed country musician, country songwriter who had become popular in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and then Wayne Walker, who basically was an early person on the rockabilly scene. What's interesting about Red Sovine's version is that it's pretty much a straight country shuffle. There's a fiddle solo, guitar solo. There's nothing about it that in particular would make it stand out, either as like the arrangement. Like you can't even really hear in it what Elvis would eventually make of it. It's played completely straight.
How do you think I feel? I know your love's not real. The one I'm mad about is just to get about. How do you think I feel?
But what ended up happening was that in late 1954, Jimmy Roger Snow and his Tennessee Playboys did a cover of it, and they added a much more prominent steel guitar, decided to take it much faster, and it's in the Jimmy Roger Snow version that you can start to hear inklings of where Elvis would go on and take it.
I won't be true again. I know that I can't win, so why should I pretend that you still love me? How do you think I feel? I know your love's not real. The one I'm mad about is just a gadabout. How do you think I feel?
Have you heard either of the earlier two versions of How Do You Think I Feel?
I might have, but I can't remember. I might have.
Yeah, it's not bad. Of the two, I think I prefer the Jimmy Rogers Snow version. It's not bad, but Elvis apparently heard it and liked it, and obviously, as he was on the road, getting introduced to different acts and things like that, he did get introduced to Jimmy Rogers Snow. They became friends for a time, and at a March 5th, 1955 session at Memphis Recording Service, Sun Records, they attempted to at least rehearse and considered recording a version of How Do You Think I Feel, and drummer Jimmy Lott was present, and I guess because they couldn't get it to jive in terms of the rhythm, they wanted to take it more of a rumba feel, and because it wasn't working out the way they wanted, they ended up scrapping it, and all that we have left are two recordings of basically Scotty Moore rehearsing his guitar part, and you can hear Jimmy Lott on the drums, and I think he's got the brushes on the drums, and then Elvis is just off mic, and you can hear very faintly him singing along, especially in the breaks, the stop breaks. You can hear Elvis sing more prominently. Have you heard these two rehearsals?
I probably have. Yeah, I'm sure I have. I just can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. I can't remember stuff.
Well, of course, they're also on the A Boy from Tupelo set, so if you want to listen to them, they are available there. But the most prominent version, of course, was the version that Elvis cut September 1st, 1956, at Radio Recorders in Hollywood. Now, this was the same session that he had recorded Love Me, Paralyzed, Playing for Keeps, and How's the World Treating You. He did it in 7 takes, but only the master has survived. And it's at this point that they finally kind of got it to gel, and Elvis had, I guess, kind of been holding on to it for pretty much over a year and a half, because the difference between March 55 and September 56. Just
strange that he pulled it out.
Yeah, strange that he held on to it, pulled it out, but he apparently believed that it was worth recording because he laid it down. They worked and worked and worked on it, and finally they got it figured out. And he basically does transform it into like a country rumba. Vastly changes up the delivery on it, adding sort of a "How do you think I feel?" And when he gets to the chorus, he gets to really belt, which is not really present on either Red Sovine's or Jimmy Rogers Snow's versions.
I won't be truthful. I know that I can't win, so why should I pretend that you still love me? How do you think I feel when I know your love's not real? And you've included 3, and that's too much for me. How do you think I feel?
What do you think of Elvis's version of How Do You Think I Feel? Where did you first hear it? What do you think?
I take umbrage with the fact that you call it a country song. This is not a country song.
This is extremely country.
I'd say this is rockabilly, if you want to kind of countrify.
It's country.
No, it's not country. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you got to go back and listen to the originals because it is country.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the
F.
We're talking about the Elvis version, right? He's known to take country songs and make them not country and make them better.
Would you say that? I got to throw, because we're going to get into that debate. Would you make the same argument about his rhythm and blues stuff, or is it just that you don't like country?
It's probably because I don't like country. When he does rhythm and blues, he can do no wrong, and the originals are awesome. I have a bias. I'm sorry. Sorry. I like some country, but some country is just. Anyway, great song. I remember when I first got the Elvis album. That's when I first heard it, because it wasn't available in any other compilation or anything. Nope. So you had to get that original Elvis album or the King of Rock and Roll 50s box set. So I can't remember if I got the box set or the album. I'm thinking the album, but great song. I like the way he enunciates some stuff. That you still love me. I like that. That part is great.
Yep, which is completely new and unique to his version as well.
And he flipped it. I still don't understand how you think this is still country. Like he lifted it out of its country.
Oh no, he definitely changes it to make, but it is still very clearly country.
Are you gonna say something like Blue Moon of Kentucky? Is that still country when Elvis does it?
Yeah, it's still country.
No, it's not.
What do you think makes a country song? Like he's literally from the country. It's from a country songwriter. Just because it takes some additional influences. Like, I don't even know what you would think of modern country music, where it's basically just hip hop or rock. Like, by any standard definition of what country music is, a lot of modern country, to your ear, wouldn't really be country.
I guess maybe it's just me. First off, I don't know about what this new music is. My people stopped making music in like early 2000s, so I don't even know anything about this new music. But yeah, I guess it's very, very subjective for me when it comes to country music.
Sure.
It's what is country, what it's not. I guess we can analyze it till the cows come home. I mean, to me, it's not country. Country is something that I think of like Hank Williams. That's country. That's pure country.
Sure.
This to me is not country. But if you think it's country, then I'm not gonna.
I think it's country in its lineage. But I think what's most important is,
which I don't disagree on.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about it is that because Elvis does flip it and turn it into something else, because it's not rock and roll either.
It's not rock. I said rockabilly.
Yeah. But even then, like, I can't think of really a lot of rockabilly songs that have this sort of feel, this sort of rumba rhythm. This is very much in line. Like, it's like we've talked about before, talking about the 50s stuff and going into the 60s, and, you know, people complaining about, the movie songs were so different, or even people who were really not fans of even some of the 70s stuff, you know, the big ballads and things like that. This is Elvis expressing a diversity of musical interest here, you know, that he takes it into a feel that was not prominent in really either genre to pull in rumba. But I definitely first heard this on the 50s master set, the King of Rock and Roll 50s master set, and then it was forever before I ever heard the second album in full. And I always thought that it was a very underrated track. It was buried on the back of that album. I think it was the last track on that.
He didn't record it thinking this would be a hit, right? He
recorded
it thinking it was an album cut.
Totally, yeah. It was completely intended to just flush out that second album. Right. And so it was not intended to be a single. He didn't think that it was going to be, you know, a big thing. But it is interesting that he was, you know, going back and pulling from his influences. Sure. So
he went so far back that he put in Old Shep on there, which I don't get.
It's true, yeah.
That album is strong, but when you hear Old Shep, you're like, oh, God.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. You know, there is a little bit of, even on his second album, of him being a little nostalgic for the types of music that influenced him, both on the rhythm and blues and country side, and going all the way back to, super country
stuff.
like Old Shep.
I think that one has Ready Teddy and Rip It Up on it, too.
So rock and roll, And there's not a lot of covers at all. There were basically the two original versions and then Elvis's, and that was about it. Spankox would go on to remix it on the Remixes album. It's not one of his stronger ones. He doesn't change a whole lot. He just basically adds, you know, some additional effects and beats.
Do you think I feel? But I know your love's not real. The girl I'm mad about is just to get by. How do you think I feel? But how do you think we stand? I know you made the plans. Another's pretty face has put me
I just wanted to spotlight a 50s song that's still on the list that we hadn't talked about. It's one that's definitely not one that I think is talked about very much. I think it's a fairly strong, rockabilly song, but it's not, it's not on the same level as Baby Let's Play House or something, but it's all right.
Yeah, it's good. I don't mind it. I mean, it's not a standout, but it's 50s Elvis, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So that's my song of the week.
All right. So now I went with something that you guys discussed on the last episode. I picked Ito Eats.
Oh, wow.
Eat to eat like teeth are out of style. Eat to eat like teeth are out of style. Eat to eat like teeth are out of style. Eat to eating all the while. Eat to eat all the night and the day. Everybody eat to eat all the night and the day.
From 1961 film Blue Hawaii. Now, I think I already mentioned I'm not picking songs that I'm like a big fan of. I'm just picking songs now just at random. I'm doing what RCA did when they came out with his Potluck and other albums, just grabbing stuff and just throwing it. Actually, not even Potluck, Camden. I'm taking the Camden route and just grabbing stuff for no reason at all, no rhyme and reason. So it was written by Sid Tepper and Roy Bennett, who wrote a crap ton of Elvis songs in the 60s. Great stuff, like Song of the Shrimp, Mexico, New Orleans. But then again, they wrote stuff like Confidence, which, yeah. This was recorded on March 22nd, 1961 at Radio Recorder Studio B in California during the Blue Hawaii sessions. Now, obviously, this was a song that was dictated by the script, I'm guessing. So, it's just, I don't know.
Apparently, in the script, apparently it was not intended for Chad to sing. It was supposed to be like the whole group of the Hawaiian friends. Yeah. Making fun of their other friend. Yeah.
I know. It's like one of Elvis's friends in the film. So I'm like, well, then why did Elvis record it? Who was the person that said we need Elvis singing Ito Eats? And why didn't they stop it? Like the Colonel, Hal Wallace, Steve Scholes, Torog, even Elvis himself. Like, why didn't anybody step in and say, wait a second, why are you singing this?
Yeah, it's a little rougher on the edges.
Yeah, it's like, and they left this in the film, but they took out like a song like "Stepping Out of Line," which is to me 1,000
stronger. Yeah,
way stronger.
Ito is an eating boy. He never Is that eating boy the same as the first one on the first one?
Ito is an eating boy. This is a different tune.
Okay. Ito is an eating boy.
He never got enough of fish.
Boys, after he says everybody, we could use a little more of a tact from you. You know, deep.
This is a different melody here.
Ito is an
He never get enough of
right. Okay. Even eat the shell from the coconut.
Granted, Elvis does his best to make something out of this. Like, his voice is spectacular. But man, what a waste on something like this. Like, what's the point of this song? Like, the dude's a glutton, so let's talk about how much he eats and the various speeds he can consume food.
Yeah.
Like, what a waste of Elvis's voice, too, which I've said, like, he's at the top of his game here. And to be wasted on direct like this, like, oh my God. By the way, I was going to ask you, they talk about him consuming coconut shells and not getting a stomachache. Can you do that? Can you eat coconut shells?
No, that's the joke.
Okay. But I thought maybe, you people can actually consume it.
No. Yeah. No, it's just, it's like saying, he eats so much candy that he even eats the wrapper. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think about this song?
As talked about with Beck, I can kind of take or leave this
one.
one.
I love this song.
No, I can kind of take or leave this one. I don't hate it as much as some Elvis fans do. The thing that stuck out to me about it is that obviously it's much more calypso in genre, which just goes to show that, like, a bunch of white Hollywood creatives didn't really care what genre was being shown a film set in Hawaii, because it's supposed to be like, oh, it's Hawaiian music, but it like calypso comes from like the Caribbean, which is on like the other side of the country.
Yeah.
So
that
yeah,
doesn't make sense in terms of the Hawaiian background either.
But yeah,
like, what did you think when you first heard this? Like on the Blue Hawaii soundtrack, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I just, I never thought that it was as bad as people made it out to be. It's certainly not a Yoga Is As Yoga Does, or a Dayton or Dominic or whatever that people like to criticize some of those other ones. I think it's just the ridiculousn's of the lyrics themselves that people take issue with. I think musically, Elvis is fine here, and the arrangement is fine.
Yeah, it's just the content. It's like,
yeah,
why is he wasting his time here? Anyway,
yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing. I think if he had done a recording of the exact same melody with just different lyrics that weren't stupid, I think it could have been an all right song on its own terms.
Hey, eat a little faster. Hey, eat a little slower.
Ito eats like Tit-a-ra-a-sta. Ito eats like Tit-a-ra-a-sta. Ito eats like Tit-a-ra-a-sta.
When you say that, stranger smile.
Like, I could have swallowed this if, say, on the set he sang this, and they were, it's just like it's like spur of the moment. Like, he just sings this, kind of like what was the other song? What was that song that him and was it in Wild in the Country?
Oh yeah, Husky Dusky Day.
Husky Dusky. If this was another Husky Dusky, that would be fine. But the fact that they actually went in the studio and laid this down, I was like,
and of course, I mean, it wasn't an improvised song or one that he was previously familiar with. It was expressly written for the movie.
Yeah, and they should have took it like that. They should have said, "Here, okay, these are the lyrics, Elvis. They're very easy to sing. Can you just sing it on the, while we're recording, and everybody else could join in."
Yeah, I see what you're meaning. Like it was, if it had been like a diegetic moment where the character of Chad just sort of starts singing, but without the instrumentation.
Yeah, and spur of the moment, like just start singing it. And
if the
it doesn't matter
presentation,
if they mess it up. It's just these guys are on the beach and they're just singing about their friend.
Yeah, I think it's
the fact that they went out.
That it's so polished is almost more off-putting than,
that's probably it. That's probably what.
Yeah, it's like, God, they put so much effort into it.
Not only that, they did 9 takes.
So tell us about the takes.
9 was the master. Listening to take 1, it's noticeable. Elvis says "Ito eats" instead of "Ito eat." Have you noticed that? I don't know. It's he says "Ito eat" and he has that kind of like that accent going on. But if you listen to the early takes, he actually says "Ito eats like blah blah blah." This one's a false start, and Elvis messes up, and then they start doing a bit rehearsal, trying to get the wordage down. Take 6 is fun, where Elvis stops and he says, "It sounds like he's saying teat." So he starts laughing at that.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Ito eat like teat. All right. I knew I was going to say it. I'm saying teat.
Geo, take 5.
As you guys pointed out, and as I'm going to point out, this was released on the Blue Hawaii soundtrack in October of 1961, and it like the album sold like hotcakes, and it's definitely because Ito Eats is in that album.
Sure. That
was the hit.
Not Can't Help Falling in Love. No.
They put the wrong single up.
Can you imagine Elvis closing every show with Ito Eats?
That would be something. And they have some fool on stage like eating fast and eating slow. Hey, Charlie, you got to say.
Ito eat like Tit-a-ra-a-sta. Ito eat like Tit-a-ra-a-sta.
When you say that, strangers smile.
Let's light some sand.
If you want to check out Ito eating and Elvis singing about it, you can watch him perform the song in the film, singing and dancing while Ito's eating. I don't even know why they have this in the film, but when it comes to covers, oddly enough, I found a cover by an Italian cover group called the Goodfellas. which is funny because they're Italian and Goodfellas. This was on their 2010 album called He Was the King. The Goodfellas play the music of Elvis Presley. This is okay. I guess I don't really mind it because the lead singer kind of has an accent and it kind of goes with the song. It's kind of fun. I don't know. As long as Elvis is not doing it, I don't mind it. Like if you're at a luau and you're just kind of grooving with this song, I think it goes well. It's fine, but yeah.
It the night and the day. It the night and the day. It do here and it and boy, he never get enough from fish and boy. He eat everything, just don't care what. He even eat the shell from the coconut.
I think it's just me. It was just a waste of Elvis's talent. Yeah. That's why I pick on it. But yeah, that's my song of the week.
I dig it.
Cool. And that's our episode for the week. Let us know what you guys thought of our main topic, the Sweet Inspirations album. If you guys heard it before, what did you think? If you didn't hear it and you want to check it out, how can they let us know what they think?
Yeah, tcbcast@gmail.com. Or, of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well.
Awesome. And if these guys want to hear extra stuff and they want to hear maybe Beck's review of the Elvis film early, how can they do that?
Yeah, that'll be patreon.com/TCBcast. You can help support the show. And also, if you liked what we did with the Sweet Inspirations album, this is very much like what we do on our TCBcast Jukebox, which is a bonus episode we do every month, where we go through an album of one of Elvis's contemporaries or influences. As mentioned earlier, Terry Stafford we just did, and we've done Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke and Johnny Cash.
Pat Boone.
Yes, Pat Boone even, yes.
So we don't just pick people we like. We take a shot at everybody.
Yeah. So,
all right. Well, until next time, it's a hot time in Florida.
And a rainy night in Georgia.
You've been listening to the TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast. Justin Gosman and Gurdip Ladar have left the building.
Someone must have stomped on his head with those blue suede shoes.
Thank you and good night.